This was another highly voted, regarded Unsolved Mysteries case.
Give it to me. I'm going to solve it right now, too.
No, Sean, the point is not to solve. No. Okay, so this one's pretty wild.
Well, it better be, so.
All right. So this one is about the Tallman family. And the Tallmans, there was Alan and Debbie Tallman and their 2 kids, and they asked for their kids' names to be changed to protect them. And this happened back in 1987, so quite a while ago. So the Tallmans were a church-going, credible family, is how Unsolved Mysteries
I don't trust them.
describe them. Okay, off the bat. And they were from Hurricane, Wisconsin. Once again, what?
No.
Go for it.
Once again, it was a small farming town. 2 little kids. They're a young family, and they're just doing their best to build their little slice of paradise. And they buy their dream house. This is the house that they think they're going to grow up their entire lives in and raise their family.
Dope.
So they move in, and immediately both of their kids get really sick. And the mom talks about it, and she says it felt like they were sick more than they were okay. She was constantly taking them to like the doctor to get checkup, and they could never figure out what was going on, but they would have like fevers and stuff. So they have a little 2-year-old girl and I think like a 10-year-old son in the house. And so I don't know where, but along the way, they buy this bunk bed. And this bunk bed is like a handmade bunk bed. The pictures they had, it looks interesting. It looks very handmade. They put it together in the basement, but the night that they decide to move it up to the house, things start happening. So they move it upstairs. The boy will call Danny. Danny's sleeping in the room next to the room with the bunk bed in it. And he had inherited his mom and dad's alarm clock. And he thought it was awesome because he could like listen to the radio.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
He was way stoked. So as he's falling asleep and the parents are falling asleep, Danny comes running out of the room screaming. And they're like, what's going on? And he said, the alarm clock. And I'm like, what about it? And they said, Danny goes, it keeps going back and forth. And he said that the station, for those who don't know, used to turn into the radio, and you would turn a dial and it would go over the stations and switch stations, right? And he said that it would just keep going back and forth, back and forth. And his dad sleepily says, hey, if this is going to be a problem, we're just going to take your alarm clock away. Obviously, he doesn't believe his child. And Danny's like crying. They get him to calm down. They get him to go back to sleep. Couple days later, the dad, Alan, he's downstairs in the basement and he's painting. And his wife's making lunch upstairs, and she says, like, Alan, food's ready. So he goes, oh, okay. And he wipes his brush off, and he very carefully sets it on his tray so that it doesn't drip anywhere. Runs upstairs and eats. And he comes downstairs, and he looks at the tray, and his brush is gone. And no one else has been downstairs. And he looks over, and in the paint can, the brush is turned upside down in the paint.
Dickheads. Whoever did that.
So now the dad is starting to believe, okay, something,
Isn't right.
this is odd. Not necessarily like the devil's in our house, but he's like, okay, this is odd. So a couple days later, within the same week, the mom is putting the 2-year-old to bed. And as she's saying goodnight to her daughter, the 2-year-old says, Mom? She says, yeah. And she goes, there's a witch behind the door. And the mom's hair stands up on the back of her neck as her back is facing towards the door. She goes, what'd you say, honey? And she goes, there's a witch behind the door. And her mom freaks out internally, not in front of the kid. She doesn't want to scare the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Goes, tells Alan. He's like, that's weird. They decide not to tell Danny. Couple nights later, Danny starts sleeping in the living room. And the mom says, Danny, are you okay? Like, what's the matter with your bed? And he goes, it's nothing. She goes, no, what is it, honey? And he goes, I just keep seeing this old lady standing at my door.
Nope.
And they specifically didn't tell Danny because they didn't want to freak him out, right? At this point, the mom is terrified. Understandably.
Right. Yeah.
So she does what any God-fearing Christian woman would do, and she contacts her pastor. And she says, we need you to come over, and we have some stuff to tell you. And once again, they're interviewing the actual pastor. And homeboy was quick to diagnose this as demonic entities. He said he like walked in, felt the presence. They told him what happening, and he's like, oh yeah, there's demons in your home.
Beans, greens, tomatoes.
Demons, Satan, Lucifer. So after that, things seemed to escalate. Each of the family members recall hearing like their names being called in a distant part of the house. They would hear slams in the kitchen, doors slamming shut, and the kids are terrified. They will not sleep in their room at this point. And so Alan gets so fed up, and I bet he's just like loss of sleep. You know, he can't protect the feeling of helplessness, like he can't protect his family. He loses it one night. And in the living room, he shouts at the top of his lungs, like, leave my children alone. If you want to mess with anyone, mess with me. And after that, he comes home from his job one night, gets out of his car, and starts walking to his front door on a windless night. When he hears a howl of wind start to pick up. And he said it sounded like a storm all around him, and the wind and howling just got louder and louder, like a rushing. And he hears, come here. And it's behind him, so he turns around, and he hears again, come here. So he goes around the side of his house, and as he goes around the side of his house, the howling is gone. The wind is gone, and there's no one there. So he turns around, starts to go back to his door, and the howling starts again, getting louder and louder. And he hears it one more time behind him. Come here. He turns around, and he sees inside of his garage glowing fire. His garage is on fire. So he runs in, terrified, sets down, he remembers he set down his lunch pail, and he thinks, my garage is on fire. Runs back outside, looks at his garage, no light. So he thinks he's full on losing it, terrified. Runs inside, grabs his lunch pail, and starts to walk into the living room. And the lunch pail is like punched out of his hand across the room. And his wife said he came into their bedroom, threw his keys, and he just lost it. He was like running around screaming, and it took her a while to calm him down. So the whole family's on edge. They're all tired. They can't sleep. It gets to the point where Alan has to sleep in the room with his two kids. So he sleeps every night on the floor. And one night as he's, what?
Just asking his kids to tuck him in.
He's like, Danny, there's a noise. Go check it out. He's like, lame ass dad. Okay, so he's sleeping on the floor. And as he's falling asleep, his eyes shoot wide open. And he's staring into the darkness of his room. And he says right above him, he sees mist starting to come in. And it starts to solidify into a figure. And in both of his ears, he hears, you are dead. So he sits straight up, screams, grabs his kids, and from then on, they all sleep in the same room. They don't know what to do. They're at their last straw. Pastor's not helping at all. And he has to work late night shifts several times a week. Understandably, he doesn't want to leave his family home alone, so he calls a super close relative to come stay the night until he can get home. The relative, they don't want to tell too much because they want the dude to stay at the house, right? Plus, he knows his brother doesn't believe in any supernatural stuff at all. So he thinks it will be like a calming presence. He'll protect the house. It will be good. But what happens that night is, while Alan is gone, his brother is laying down, waiting for Alan to get home. And his brother's eyes pop wide open. And right above him, he sees mist starting to come over him. And he sees the mist start to solidify. And in his brother's ears, he hears, "You are dead." And his brother sits straight up through the mist and screams at the top of his lungs and runs out of the room, leaving the children. Wife comes in and says, "Where are the babies?" And he says, "In the room." And he's like screaming. She can't. They grab both babies. They grab all of their stuff and they leave. And they never went back to the house. They went and stayed with family members. They sold the house, and they had the bunk bed destroyed in a landfill. And to this day, people ask them if they think it will follow them, and they said they haven't experienced anything yet, and since they left, they have never experienced any supernatural occurrences. And a new family moved into that house, and they haven't reported anything. The end.
That's an interesting object to be haunted, a bunk bed.
And there was like no real connection. Like they mentioned it in the beginning of the story, and then like that's it. I don't know why, but there for some reason that family connects and attributes all the hauntings to this bunk bed.
That's weird. You said it looks super handmade.
Yeah.
Like wood?
Yeah.
Or like Legos or
Like I went to Home Depot and tried to make a bunk bed. That's how it looked.
Yikes. Did you ever see that show, Haunting of
Hill
Hill House?
House?
Is
That's
that what
exactly
you're
what I
thinking
thought
about,
of. Yeah.
Where she was like sitting
Broken
down on
neck
the
lady?
couch?
Yeah. That was pretty terrible. That's the first episode.
Oh, yeah, dude.
But I was waiting for the smoke to come over Danny and say, like, "You're dead." And Danny be like, "Danny's not here."
Hello, Mrs. Torrance.
Ghost was like, "Oh,
Just
damn it."
Troll the ghost.
I was
Dude.
like, you chill, you chill.
You're like, if you want the Wi-Fi password, just ask for it.
If there's one thing I think we all know now is never challenge entities.
Yeah, for real.
Mhm.
After the dad said that,
Come at me, bro.
Ghost is all like, "Damn, shawty, all
Yeah.
right."
Challenge accepted. No,
I was talking to someone the other day, and she was like into scary stories and stuff like that, and she's like, at very least, after like listening to all the scary stories and all the stuff that's happened, I'll know what to do when something comes up. Because she's like, I brought it up to my family or like a group family at holidays, and no one knew what to do, or everyone would like freak out.
yeah.
She's like, but I feel like I'm going to be good. I've been listening to all these stories about what people have and haven't done and what works.
Bro, I kind of did a inward self-reflection, and I was wondering, why am I so obsessed with like scary stuff and true crime and murders? Because it is like a weird taboo thing to be into. And I came down to, or I decided that I'm just data mining. So it's like when a situation comes up, I will better recognize it, and I will have more data to act off. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like I might be like, I might know, don't do this, don't do that. And I think that's what helps my anxieties in life.
That's what you tell yourself.
Yeah.
Dad.
Really,
I'm data mining
freaky
so
boy.
that I can do these things.
Yeah.